Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters by Anfield Index. It's just business as usual now, isn't it? The Reds are top of the league and they will be heading to Anfield South come March time as we are looking to vanquish Newcastle and add another Carabao Cup to the Champions Wall. And it was all about the victory over Spurs last night, wasn't it? And this morning, we heard from Arne Slot, and we might even have a few other stories for people sat next to other people. We'll have to see what comes up on this show. I'm delighted as ever to be joined by the renowned and the respected David Lynch. I mean, you were at the game last night, David. It's brilliant, weren't we? There's no other way of putting it.
Yeah, just sensational, really. To the point at which I would genuinely put that up there for me, and I know people will disagree. I've had people say maybe Real Madrid, maybe Bayer Leverkusen, some of those games, but for me that's the best performance we've seen under Arne Slot, just in terms of sheer level of control from minute 1 to minute 90, giving up literally nothing in terms of shots at goal. Having so many themselves, getting in the Spurs box over and over again and just being a threat, and obviously scoring 4 goals, keeping it to 0 in the semi-final of a cup where they went into it 1-0 down already. It's just an absolutely sensational performance. And like I say, yeah, right up there is the best for me.
And people sort of build it in terms of, and even I saw Sky afterwards were giving it the narrative of Spurs were hopeless. They didn't target for the 80th minute, but we just didn't let them at all. We just controlled every single area of this game, didn't we?
This is it. I mean, there's so much of the analysis already has been kind of, Spurs weren't good enough. Tottenham did this and that. They didn't turn up. But I don't think that's fair to Liverpool to say that, because there's a few facts that come into this. I mean, the starting one is that, Tottenham, as bad as they've been in the league results-wise this season, they beat Liverpool in the first leg. They also scored 3 times against Liverpool when the sides met in the league. So, for all the issues they've had defensively, they've been a side who've been able to score goals. And by the way, they've only been beaten by more than 1 goal twice this season, and both times it's been Liverpool. So, as much as they've struggled in the league, and the league form kind of shows that, and the Premier League position shows that, still a side who this should have been more difficult against. And the way that Liverpool completely limited them on both sides of the game in terms of just absolutely hammering them in terms of creating chances, and then just stopping a Spurs side who are capable of creating chances. It was just unbelievable, really, and huge credit to Liverpool, because, particularly when you think that, okay, I get that Spurs wouldn't have attacked as much at 1-0 or 1-1 on aggregate because, you're holding a lead or you're trying to just keep the game tight. But once Liverpool get ahead, that's kind of invites Spurs to, okay, well, lean into your best instincts, really, which is to go all out attack. And they tried, but they just couldn't do anything. Not a single shot on target. I think it was the expected goals tally ends up at 0.18. I think 8 touches inside the Liverpool box. Liverpool take 50 odd. These are unbelievable statistics against the side who, for all the flaws that they've got, are an unbelievable attacking side. So, it's just an incredible performance, really, in terms of just the sheer ability to limit any Spurs threat whatsoever, but in the same time persisted with your threat and constantly create chances and finish those chances off. Just an incredible all-round performance and the most dominant we've seen under Slot.
Yeah, it is hard to think of just a complete performance where across the pitch it's been so good. And Red for Life, saying there, morning from Toronto, Canada, morning as well, excited for the final. So are we. Anfield South beckons very shortly. And it is right about a few players, because some were absolutely sensational. I mean, the skipper spoke afterwards about the game and praising his teammates and other people, but this is the player who is leading us. This is the player who's behind the clean sheets. He was imperious again, wasn't he?
Yeah, I feel bad, really, because I don't talk about him in my post-match reviews enough, because he's just that level. I mean, the quote from Carragher is brilliant, isn't it? In terms of, he's almost too good for this level of football. And it looks like that a lot of the time. He's just cruising through games because he can't, nobody can touch him in terms of quality. There's a reason that no players or attacking players from the opposition go anywhere near him if they can avoid it, because he's too strong, too quick, too clever. His touch is too good. His passing is too good. He's got everything you need in a centre back. I've said it so many times. I genuinely believe he's the best we've ever seen in this position. And again, showed it yesterday. Just so dominant whenever the ball came near him. So much composure, his ability to pass the ball through the lines, and then he gets the goal as well, which I think he'd like to get more of. Certainly, and maybe set piece is something to talk about. But he gets that goal as he did it at Wembley in the final last year, and sets Liverpool up, and a real captain's performance to kind of lead them into the final.
I mean, it is a great thing that he is key to us keeping clean sheets at the moment, which we seem to have got into that habit. So they'll be pleased about that. Will Arne Slot be still putting in an advert in LinkedIn for a set piece coach, or might yesterday have just saved someone?
I wonder. I mean, I know it's something they're still working on constantly to try and get better, and sometimes you can have a bit of luck or be a bit unlucky, and sometimes maybe we've got to recognise as well that maybe Arsenal being so good, maybe a lot of that is kind of just down to that Saka's delivery is just so freakishly good, really, and maybe there's not many like him who can kind of do that, because I feel like Arsenal are drying up a little bit actually in that aspect since Saka's been out. So that's really interesting. It's not so much about how do you get a free man and your tactics around it. Maybe it's just about delivery, and we don't put enough emphasis on that. Maybe Liverpool's delivery and set pieces just isn't that level, or certainly from corners at least. So it's an interesting one, because the balance is as well that whilst Liverpool have been poor in terms of attacking set pieces this season, they've been brilliant defensively. So you've got to recognise that Aaron Briggs and his team are actually doing a very good job on that side of things. So it just could be a little bit better around attacking set pieces. So whether that influences Liverpool to get someone in, we'll kind of have to see. I'm sure a decision around that will wait till the summer before they decide what they're doing there. But it's worth giving praise for the way that they defend set pieces, I'd say. But there are maybe some gains to be made there in terms of attacking them, because it was just corner after corner after corner, wasn't it, last night? And then finally one goes in. So hopefully that can be the start of getting a few more.
Yeah, it's funny that Red for Life said Don was surprisingly bad with his corners. I think 2 actually ended up with Spurs getting on the break, but Maka then puts that last one in. The Virgil head, a lot to like. And set piece coach, it's on the docket, but well down the list. And there's one player we've got to talk about last night. I mean, Connor Bradley. Son got the Mbappe treatment last night, but not just that, up and down the pitch and an assist as well. I mean, every time we see this, and he mentioned it afterwards, he is developing, and he was brilliant in this one, wasn't he?
Yeah, we spoke as well about, kind of after the Real Madrid game, about the significance of that tackle on Mbappe for what it does for the crowd and gets the team going and gets Connor Bradley going. These are, it's simplistic, but a big crunching tackle like that, it has consequences outside of that singular moment of winning the ball. It really, really does ramp things up. And I think another one. And what I love about them as well, they're really nicely timed. He's not trying to hurt anyone. They're really, they're meaty challenges, but there's no snideness in them whatsoever. And it really did get the crowd going again. And he is just phenomenal, by the way. I said this in my post-match review last night. I think if Liverpool were to lose Trent Alexander-Arnold this summer, and we obviously hope that's not the case, but if they were, for me, they should be looking for a backup right back, because Connor Bradley he plays the game in a totally different way to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he is a Liverpool quality left back, and he can play right back, and he can play that position for a Liverpool team that is hunting for trophies. He's that good. So phenomenal. Just wins his duels as a kind of, you get that as a guarantee, but he's really good on the attacking side as well. Very much reminds me profile wise of a kind of younger Andy Robertson. In the way he approaches the game, and the quality he brings on that attacking side. He showed that in getting his assist. He creates chances. I think he completes 3 out of 4 dribbles as well. So he's literally got everything that you want there. And yes, very different to Trent, who is a kind of an outlier in the way he plays that position, but still just as much quality, and absolutely didn't have a single worry about him being there instead of Trent last night.
Nah, it did feel like another small step forward in his development. And who's also on the photo that I want to talk about in terms of his development, Dominic Szoboszlai, I mean, it just seems almost in the last month and a half, I don't know what, that he's now on 5 goals, 5 assists, 10 goal contributions. He just seems to almost be, I don't know if he's taking more responsibility, David, or being a more of a focal part for the team, but he's in great form at the moment, and he was brilliant in this one again, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, that work rate off the ball has been there all season, hasn't it? I mean, he can contest a ridiculous amount of duels, I think, last night, which again, that's just what he's all about, and he has been all season. It's been one of the reasons you'd say he was undroppable, but we've always felt kind of that you'd like a little bit more end product from him because he's so capable of it. We've seen it at his previous clubs, what he does for his national team. He can score goals, he can get assists, and I don't think we should say, the defensive work he's doing it could take away from that. I don't think that's the case. I think he's capable of combining them, or certainly that's been the approach of the coaching staff because they felt they can get a little bit more out of him. So we are starting to see that now. The timing of his runs into the box is perfect. Appreciation of where he should stand to get opportunities, and then his finishing is there and his ability to create chances. So really, really good to see that because that was a really kind of striker's finish, that one last night. Running onto a through ball, one-on-one with the goalie and just slots it. Want to see a few more of them. And that's definitely something that's been worked on with him. So, hopefully he can kind of keep that up. And we are seeing more and more of that as the season progresses, that he is getting in those positions more frequently and he's doing more with it as well. So, you add in him as an extra goal threat and it's kind of like, well, the goals are coming from absolutely everywhere now. How do you stop Liverpool? And that's the aim for Slot and his coaches, is to make a team that is like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a stat that went around this morning that Liverpool's midfield alone now has 33 goal contributions this season, which is insane. The goals are coming from everywhere, as we say. And while this player doesn't quite have the goals, he still got a brilliant reception last night, Darwin Nunez. I mean, obviously everyone wants him to succeed in Liverpool. Sure, we've talked on this pod before about short-term and all that, but for this game alone, he worked his socks off and he linked well, didn't he, overall?
Yeah, brilliant. Again, keep coming back to this. Just want to make him useful between now and the end of the season and try and get a tune out of him. And that is absolutely what was happening. Because, I mean, he's coming in here in a Carabao Cup semi-final, a chance to get you to Wembley, and he's putting in a really competent performance that, yes, he's not the guy who's getting all the shots these days. It's not that kind of chaos or the madness that we're getting, but we're getting sensible performances where he's just doing everything to help the team. I mean, his kind of work rate off the ball has never been in doubt. We know he's a mad presser, but he's getting more intelligent in how he does that. We're really seeing that. He's I saw it so many times that he's kind of forcing Spurs to circulate the ball in the way that Liverpool want, because he's bending his runs to cut off passing lanes, and his cover shadow is really, really, he's clever with how he does that now. So that is massively helpful. Then defending from corners, I think does he 4-headed clearances from corners last night, so he's helpful there. And then the other element of as well is that he's getting the ball up the pitch brilliantly. I think he completes about 80% of his passes. I just think back to that Bologna game early in the season. He's completing 33% of his passes, and you're like, you can't be in the team if you're going to do this, because you're dragging the team down. You don't need him to be prolific or absolutely outrageous world-class attacking quality. Just help the other attackers and help the team in terms of defending. And he absolutely did that. So huge credit to him, by the way, because, it would have been easy for him to kind of lose his head early in the season when it was a bit difficult. New managers come in who clearly doesn't fancy him at that moment, but they've worked on things and they've worked. And now he's playing a big role really in a side that's competing on all 4 fronts. And you weren't disappointed to see him in the team yesterday, and he massively contributed. So, that is a big credit to him, I think, but also, the coaching staff, because they're really, really getting a tune out of him at the moment. And, I'm saying he's not contributing in the attacking sense massively, but he wins the penalty, doesn't he, with a run in behind. And if Kinski doesn't bring him down, he taps that one into an empty net, or you hope so anyway. Really, really good all-round performance. And he's just going from strength to strength at the moment.
Yeah, the supporting cast and anyone who's coming in is having a big impact. If he can keep that form and impact up, it should be a good end to the season for him, no matter what happens in the summer. And I almost feel bad. I should just say this, viewers, listeners. I know people will be banging on at us. What about Gakpo and his 21st goal contribution? What about Mo Salah with another goal and assist? They were all brilliant. We can't just go through the entire team start to finish and we'll be here all day. But yeah, so many brilliant performances on that bit. And the one I did want to ask you about, David, is it's great to win. It's great to get Wembley on the docket. But with Plymouth coming up, there are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Premier League games. Everton away, Wolves at home, Villa now away midweek, City away, and Newcastle at home. And that's before the end of February. In the weirdest, bizarrest thing, we're a game behind Arsenal. Well, by the end of February, we'll have played a game more. We are going to learn a lot by the end of this month, aren't we?
Yeah, it's just a massive month. I mean, I'd be interested to know, really, you know, Slot was kind of asked about this. How do you feel about the Villa game being moved forward? I'd be interested to know what amount of influence Liverpool were able to have on that in terms of where that was placed and whether they had much of a say in it and whether they were happy with it coming now. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if they were, because they're in this rhythm of tough games coming up, games constantly. You know, you look at the way it's landed and you know, every team that they play has got a game prior. You know, no team they're facing in this month has got more rest. You know, Everton have got an FA Cup game at the weekend, the same as Liverpool. Villa are going to have a game on the weekend prior to Liverpool. You know, they're coming into it with the same amount of rest. So Liverpool aren't at a disadvantage in any of these. So that's landed quite nicely for them. And I guess you're going to have to play these tough games at some point. So why not push them all together and just get it done in a really intense month? And, you know, particularly when you've got a squad that is fully fit pretty much as well. So you've got options to rotate through that. So, you know, it's not a bad time for it to land, really. So I would be interested to know what Liverpool's influence on it was. But it's a massive month coming up, isn't it? It's absolutely huge. And you just hope that Liverpool can get through it. And if you get some wins here, you know, if they get the right amount of wins here, I don't necessarily expect that they will win all of those games. But if they get the right wins, they can maybe avoid defeat all through this month. Then, I mean, you're going to come out the other side of it, really, with Liverpool pretty much with one hand on the trophy, I'd say.
I mean, you referred to it there, and it was what I was going to ask you, that we'll never know for definite. But if you could get on a slot behind closed doors, truth serum, whatever it was, is there a bit of you that thinks actually what he'd say was, Everton, it was great that was rearranged at the time because we were just starting to fade a bit, energy and the break's done us really well. And yes, it is 5 games, but whilst I've got pretty much all my squad, you suspect Trent's going to be back as well fit and we're firing, actually just bring on the games.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, you know, it's helpful you've got a kind of home game in there, haven't you, with Liverpool against Wolves as well? So that breaks it up a little bit. A game you'd expect Liverpool to be pretty dominant in. So that's kind of helpful. And then, as you say, you've got that full squad there pretty much. You know, Trent's going to be back very soon. So, you know, hopefully Liverpool are going into this run with absolutely no injuries, which is massive. So, you know, I think he's going to have to make full use of that squad. I think, you know, if you maybe in difficult situations, maybe you're only 1 goal up and you're going to have to make some subs you don't kind of want to make. You have to be a bit smart with that. But, you know, he's got the options. He's got the best squad in the league. And, you know, again, you can tell the story, can't you, that these are all absolutely ridiculously tough games. But, you know, Everton are very low down the league. City are really struggling this season and got absolutely thumped by Arsenal last time. So that's not as tough a game. And yes, Villa's very tough, but again, they're not doing quite as well as they did the season before. So, you know, you can tell yourself a story to get Liverpool to go and dominate all of these. And the fact is, Liverpool are quite clearly the best side in the division. So go into these fixtures and show that, really.
Yeah, it is funny the way the narrative's painted, if you want to look at it that way. The other side of the argument is, exactly as you said, Everton aren't doing great. They have struggled this season. Manchester City, they have got Real Madrid the game before this as well, the second leg. So you hope they're still in it. So whatever legs remain could be gone. And Newcastle, let's be honest, that's a week or a couple of weeks before the final. You just wonder if a lot of players will be thinking that final is their season a little bit as well. So, yeah, you can look at it one of two ways. At the end of this month, we will know a lot about a lot of things. And speaking of months, we can now refer to it. It is shut, the January window. And I know you wrote about this, that nothing really happened. Now, a lot of people commented on it, and I know you enjoy your Twitter comments and the replies on the YouTube and things that you get quite regularly in this regard. So you will have seen this, no doubts at all, that people saying, oh, it's standard January quiet, nothing, alluding to a big summer. But it is talked about a lot. Liverpool have to do stuff this summer, don't they? We can't just go into next season with like 7 or 8 players. There's a surely one way or another got to happen, even if it is 1 in, 1 out.
Yeah, but I'd be very, very wary. And I did not write this in the piece. In fact, the very first line of the piece, for anyone who didn't get to read it, was basically knocking down the idea that it's, you can guarantee it's going to be a busy summer because it wasn't that busy in the winter. I think anybody who's promising that is being daft, really, because the fact is Liverpool will do what they need to do. So, okay, as a starting point, the one thing I think you can guarantee that Liverpool will do is sign a left back, and there's going to be some decisions to make there around Costas and Robbo, and one of those maybe moving on. I think Costas it was a possibility, moved on last summer, by the way. So I think that's going to come back around, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think left back is a clear area to improve this team. Yeah. But anything that happens beyond that, it will be 1 in, 1 out. Because as I said, I can't say Liverpool have got the best squad in the league and then say, okay, well, they're going to throw thousands of millions of pounds at it next summer because they absolutely have to rip things up. It's going to be all about replacing people who leave. So if they're going to sign a centre-half, there's a massive possibility Joe Gomez goes. In fact, I would expect that he does go now to go and play more regular football at the end of this season. Darwin Nunez is attracting big interest from Saudi Arabia, and although that was not back in January, expect that will come to something in the summer, so he's going to need to be replaced. And then, there's all this talk about a kind of central midfielder as something that needs looking at. But I think people will be surprised. For me, I don't think it's going to be a starting quality central midfielder. I think you've got your clear 3 there. What might change is maybe, someone like an Endo might get jettisoned, might decide he wants to go and play more frequently elsewhere. If that happens, get someone who's multifunctional, can play all across the midfield as covering, and is someone of the profile that maybe Arne Slot fancies a little bit more than he does Endo. But the idea that Liverpool are going to go into this and going to absolutely throw a load of cash at it, I don't agree at all, because they don't need to. And I actually think as well, when you talk about the potential sales that they could be making as well, there's every chance that Liverpool could break even on net spend here, which, again, people are like, oh, they're not, FSG aren't spending very much. But so what? If you put together a squad that is good enough to compete on 4 fronts again, and you replace Nunez and you replace Gomez with players who are, hopefully the right quality, which Liverpool tend to do, then Liverpool could be in an excellent position to push on all fronts again. So I think that should be the approach of window. So any journalist or anyone you see out there who's promising they're going to go big in the summer, I don't believe that for a second, because I don't think they need to. And I think a lot of it will depend on what the outgoings look like mostly. But also a couple of areas where you can clearly strengthen, which I think left back is the number one priority there.
Yeah, it would. Anyone's guess what's happening this summer. And I suppose any guess this summer does relate a little bit to what's happening at the moment. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure from where you sit in the journalist box, you may just have been able to peer in towards Richard Hughes. And is there any truth or awareness that you have in the story that Richard Hughes may just have had a bit of company in the form of Virgil van Dijk's reps last night?
Yeah, he was just behind me, actually, just over my kind of left shoulder. So I did see him there with Virgil's representative. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, the one thing I would say is I've seen so many reports recently that suggesting that, it's done and Liverpool are keeping it under wraps. I can absolutely shoot that down. That is not the case as far as I understand it. For starters, it's extremely unrealistic that would be possible. There's no way that would be possible, because it's, if you get maybe Salah and Van Dijk had signed their contracts, the amount of people who would have to know about that process, and the amount of people they tell the brother, or they tell their uncle or whatever, and then that information can leak from there.
Yeah.
It's just not possible to keep these kind of things under wraps. So my experience is, when I worked at the club, as soon as those contracts are signed, or as soon as a player is signed, it gets announced immediately, because you just want to get it out there before it can leak. So that is generally how these things work. So anyone who's espousing that theory, and I've seen a few reports that that's the case, I would dismiss those immediately. They are definitely not true. I can categorically say that. But equally, it's good to see Virgil's reps there. That, they're not just there for a holiday. They're not just there for a laugh, and they're not just mates with Richard Hughes. That is interesting. And I get the sense very much still, my understanding, that there's everybody's still relaxed about it. Nobody's panicking yet. There's still a belief that it will get done. So I think that's a step forward. But as I say, take any reports that he's done and being kept quiet with it, not just a pinch of salt, just dismiss them outright because they're not true.
Fair enough. And it must be good news that they're in the ground. They're sitting next to Richard Hughes, because talks surely have got to be underway, because it's the greatest centre-half maybe the Premier League's ever seen in that regard. He's our skip, but we've got to keep him. So we will see what develops on that. And the only other thing, which I suppose links to a little bit of the summer, I'm sure you saw this. It's interesting what The Athletic clipped up, because there's two players there, Benjamin Sesko, Nico Williams, one a Red Bull forward, one an Athletic Bilbao winger, both mentioned by David Ornstein as admired by Liverpool. Sesko, especially the way he phrased it, Liverpool were quite keen on him last summer. Williams, a player they long time admired. Have you heard anything on these two around Liverpool's interest, potential move, anything in that regard at all?
No, personally, not much at all, really. I mean, obviously, I would never doubt David Ornstein, what a fantastic reporter he is, and his contacts are basically second to none in world football. So I'd never question him, whether he's right about that. But it is a long way, I would also say, from admiring a player to that being someone you'd necessarily target. I mean, for me, Nico Williams doesn't score enough goals as a left wing option for Liverpool. You look at what Gakpo is doing. I mean, maybe Liverpool feel that they could get more of that out of him, but he's not particularly prolific, and they tend to look for players who've got a kind of track record for that stuff, and they feel that they can bring that. So that's a kind of interesting one, and also the competition around him will be massive, won't it? And the wages will be huge as well. So I don't know if he's someone Liverpool would be desperate for. And of course, if they were to sign someone like him, a left winger, it would have to be because someone like Luis Diaz left, 2 years out from the end of his contract at the end of the season, definitely admired in Europe. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm not massively in on the idea that Liverpool are going to follow up interest in Williams. And Sesko is another one. If Darwin Nunez is to leave, Liverpool are going to be looking for a centre forward. Can he bring that form from the Bundesliga to the Premier League? He's still very young, quite raw, I think, from what I've seen of him. That's an interesting name, and maybe, to me, kind of maybe chimes as one that feels a little bit more realistic. But of course, again, there's going to be a lot of competition around that, and we know how frequently really are Liverpool's transfer targets kind of previewed from this long out, and then they end up signing them. I think they always tend to go down a different route in the end. I have no doubt whatsoever scouts are regularly watching both players, but in terms of that turning into anything, I haven't heard anything concrete yet.
Yeah, there's always names that brew, like Matheus Nunes a couple of seasons ago, and they just never come to fruition. It's always a completely different name that breaks late or closer to the time. And Mr. Wars asked a question there that I think it's good, because I wanted to sort of link it to something else. Diaz, because you mentioned him. The link between them are Diaz and Jota, both 28, will both have 2 years left in the summer. Now, that's kind of a pinch point quite often for this regime. We know how Michael Edwards operates. It's usually renew, sell, or very rarely it could be run down. What are your thoughts on those two at the moment, Diaz and Jota? Because there are question marks against both.
Yeah, I think you look at Diaz. I mean, he's been hugely helpful this season, hasn't he? Filling in that centre forward role. He started the season very well on that left hand side, but he is 28. There is that interest in him. He is 2 years out, and I think you can see from his agent's side of things as well that they've been clearly kind of using that interest and kind of been pushing for either a new contract or a sale. So I think there's a big decision to be made there in the summer. I think that's an interesting one that he couldn't really predict will go either way. I mean, it's interesting. Liverpool haven't seemingly open contract talks with him yet. So, that makes me kind of lean towards the idea that they'll think maybe we could turn this around, turn him over and get that money in and maybe go for someone else who's a little bit younger. So I think that's very much one to keep an eye on him. And with Jota, in a similar boat, of course, but I think the situation is made different by his injury record. I think Liverpool would struggle to sell him at this point. but I also think they'd be very reluctant to give him a new deal with the injury record he's had in recent years. So for me, Jota's almost a kind of no-brainer, really, for someone you keep around. You don't want to be utterly reliant on, but it's an absolutely huge bonus when he is available, and kind of use him like that. If you swap Nunez out for someone who's more reliable, then Jota can compete with that player. But you almost let him run down and get to the end of his contract and say, okay, well, we got our money's worth out of that. That to me would be the sensible approach with Jota, and probably the likeliest approach. Whereas Diaz, I think they will maybe think they can get some cash for him in the summer. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, we'll have to see what develops with those two. And I mean, for the squad at the moment, I never thought I remember we did a pod about a year ago. We were almost trying to see who was available to name the team, basically. That the only real issue tends to be the two that were announced this morning. Tyler Morton does have a shoulder issue. And with the greatest respect to Tyler Morton, not really an established first-team player, I think it's fair to say. Trent Alexander-Arnold not going to be back for Plymouth. Arne Slot didn't commit to the Everton game or the derby. Said, well, we'll have to see on that one. Is the big story of the season, as much as people talk about no transfers, availability is just, compared to other teams, and we're seeing like more attackers limp out for Arsenal, it just has been the real tale of the season, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big reason why you can go so deep in the domestic cups, because, you have to heavily rotate in those early rounds. And if you can do that with a fully strong squad, and you think about last night, for example, in the semi-final, Liverpool are able to make changes. I mean, they put out pretty much the strongest side, but they're able to leave Diaz on the bench, Diogo Jota, Harvey Elliott, McAllister. They all come into the game. Endo's there. Federico Chiesa doesn't even touch the pitch. It's, Gomez isn't in the squad. It's an outrageous position to be in. If you're going to compete on forefront, you need that fitness record. It's the main reason why things fell apart for me last season. So, yeah, it's an incredible position to be in. And I think, it's credit to the medical staff, the style of football that the manager's implementing, the fact he leans on days off a little bit more, which is something I've written about on Substack, if people want to read that. I think they're just doing a really good job, all of them together, and to kind of push this availability. And it's having a huge influence on Liverpool's trophy chances. And I think when we come to the end of the season, if Liverpool have got a couple of trophies on board, we will look back on that as maybe the number one influential factor in terms of that, really, and the biggest difference from last season to this season. Yeah,
it does feel just literally night and day. And there is a comment in the chat panel from John Henry. I don't think it's the actual John Henry with thoughts on Endo's situation there. As we did say that, it wouldn't be surprised if he is jettisoned, but we'll have to see what happens.
That by the way, will be a decision for Endo himself to make. I know last summer he personally was so determined to stay and prove a point. And I think he has done that. Yeah. He's kind of forced his way into the manager's plans a little bit. We're certainly seeing more of him when we used to early in the season. But again, it's kind of, you get to the end of this season, do you want to play a bit more now? You're getting towards the end of your career. Hopefully he's got a couple of winners' medals to show for his time at Liverpool. Loved his time there. But I think it's going to be more down to a kind of personal decision for him. And I just wonder whether he's going to think, okay, I've achieved everything I kind of can at Liverpool. Now I want to go on and maybe play a little bit more. So I think a lot relies on what he feels there.
Yeah, it would make sense. But if he could leave with a few medals, and I mean, hopefully leaves with a few. The FA Cup comes up this weekend. It's an interesting one. Plymouth, bottom of the Championship, away. Is this a little bit like we're looking at PSV style scenario? Is don't travel Van Dijk, don't travel Gravenberch, because as you mentioned, the availability even on the bench or people who didn't make the squad, that Chiesa, Elliott, Gomez, there's still a really strong team can go to Plymouth.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy the kind of team that you are able to put out there that will be so strong. And yet Liverpool, again, I think wouldn't be a shock to see Virgil, Gravenberch, Salah all left out of this completely. The three most used players this season, aren't they? So they really seem to get kind of special protection on the basis of that, because they are needed for the biggest of games. So wouldn't be surprised at all to see them left behind. But you think about the players that are going to come in. I can't wait to see a bit more of Chiesa. I expect him to start. Diogo Jota probably needs a start now to get him back in rhythm. Luis Diaz got rested in the last game. So can you use him for a few minutes? In central midfield, James McConnell, absolutely. If you can do it away at PSV against the Dutch champions, why can't you do it against Plymouth, who are bottom of the championship? Endo to come in as well. Right. Quanta, it's ridiculous. The level of the team that they're going to be able to put out, you would absolutely back to get the job done. So, they're in such a good position with the squad, and I'm very excited to see what kind of starting 11 he picks for this one.
Yeah, it will be a strong team, unfortunately, for Plymouth, whichever he dices it up. And the final bit, which we always do, we kind of talk a little bit of wider football. I mean, we are Wembley bound. We will face Newcastle. Is there an element for you? There's a niceness to it that it's two northern teams. It's not always the same thing. And whilst we want Newcastle to naturally enjoy a little bit of heartbreak, it is good to get a new face rather than playing Chelsea every 5 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't kind of mind Newcastle at all. I know the ownership thing, I almost have to put that to one side because I'm not a big fan of state ownership, and particularly that one, it is not great. But I also think you've got to acknowledge that if you just look at the purely football side, they're quite well run. They make very good signings. They play an attractive brand of football. They can turn over the big teams quite often. They think about the game they had against Liverpool earlier this season was an absolutely fantastic game. They're just really, really good to watch as well. So it's a tough one. It's a tough, intense game that's coming up in that Wembley one. So it's going to be really, really difficult. And obviously, you fear Isaac, you fear Gordon, don't you? The brilliant players, Bruno in central midfield. So and that big pitch could suit them as well with the pace and quality they've got. So it's a really tough one. But also the flip side is they haven't won a trophy in a long, long time. The pressure that puts on them, the experience Liverpool have, they're going to Wembley again to try and win the trophy they did last season. Everybody in this squad knows what this is all about. They don't have to feel nervous in the Wembley changing rooms. They can just think, well, same again. Let's try and do it. They almost get blasé about it in a good way. So, it's kind of a mixed one, really. Very, very good team. Very, very tough to face. I wouldn't be absolutely devastated for their fans if they did get over the line, but I also think Liverpool should be confident as well because they've got all the experience, and the league table shows again, they are the much better side. So hopefully they've learned a few things from that first meeting and go into this one and can beat them.
Yeah, there's a few saying there it should be a tough final that could go either way, but fingers crossed we come out on the right side of it. And but want to finish with this bit as well. I mean, I was generally racking my brain since we started doing these a couple of years ago. There's genuinely never been a better time to be in terms of 6 points clear with a game in hand. You head into Wembley or Anfield South in March time for a Carabao Cup final again. Injury situation is the best it's been for some time. I know people will then go to what about January and the contracts and all that, but ultimately it is about what happens on the pitch. It is just a boom time, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think everyone should really kind of soak it up because, I mean, the likelihood is they're not going to win all 4 trophies, are they? That is a huge likelihood. So, obviously there's not going to be a disappointment in that. I think Liverpool will go on and win the Premier League. I'm pretty certain about that. But so anything after that is a huge bonus. But just in this moment now, as you say, in all 4 competitions, got a final at Wembley to look forward to, got some big Premier League games up and some big atmospheres coming ahead and Champions League round of 16 already booked. Can't wait to see who they get. It's, you should kind of sit back in these moments and really soak it up and appreciate it because, not every season is going to be like this. I know it just kind of feel like it is at the moment, but, the last couple of seasons have been in a quadruple push, but difficult moments are coming. They always do in football, or moments where it'll hurt and you'll lose games, or you'll lose players to injury or whatever. So in the moments where it's overwhelmingly positive and there's just not really anything negative to focus on, just soak it up and enjoy every minute of it because, football's full of up and downs. So when you're in the ups, just grab on and really appreciate them.
Yeah, fingers crossed that this continues for this way, touch wood. So there we go, ladies and gents. Anfield southbound in March, 1 million games between now and the end of February to play, but 1 million positives at the same time. So all it leaves me to say as ever is, David, for the time, the analysis and the insight, it is greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters